It's a wild world out there, but some worlds are even wilder. Hi, I'm Tyler Habney, and you're listening to Dungeons and Dystopias. Thank you for listening. Night City, a standing corporate monument to capitalism, right here in the middle of the desert. It's a terrible place to live, with an extremely high crime rate and corporations that are actually pretty much incentivized to make your life worse. There's not a lot of things that are going great for Night City. Well, there are, but not exactly for your average common day person. Hi, I'm Tyler Habney, and I am your host for Dungeons and Dystopias. I have run a combined total of over 200 games of both Dungeons and Dragons and Cyberpunk. I happen to enjoy both systems quite a bit, so I am here to share my thoughts with you. Today, we are going to be discussing Night City, the setting of the Cyberpunk tabletop role-playing game. Quick history of Cyberpunk. Cyberpunk started in the 80s as Cyberpunk 2013. Then it got a bit more popular when Cyberpunk 2020, the next edition, released. Following that, after the ending of Cyberpunk 2020 was Cyber Generation, which isn't really talked about. I don't even think it's seen very much as canon in the Cyberpunk universe, so probably not going to be discussing Cyber Generation too much. And then a cozy little Polish company named CG Projekt Red wanted to do a adaptation of Cyberpunk 2020, so they made a video game called Cyberpunk 2077. And to bridge the gap between 2077 and 2020, Cyberpunk Red was created. Cyberpunk Red, of course, being the system that I play the most. I haven't actually played a ton of 2020 personally, but I do know how it works, and I would be interested in running some of that for my friend group at some point. But with that being said, let's talk a bit more about Night City as a location. Now, Night City has a pretty interesting history as to how it sort of became the way it is, and that starts with a man named Richard Knight, who in the late 90s could foresee a large global economic collapse coming. So he wanted to do something about it, and the way he did that was like John Galt or Andrew Ryan. He created a pretty much a corporate tax haven loophole, rich person society in the Coronado Bay, around Morro Rock in California, if you're geographically inclined. So what he does is he gets all these different building partners, and he starts working with his own Knight Foundation, and they start to build Coronado City, which is this large, like I said, it's a corporate sort of tax haven, but it's a city. It's a whole blossoming city. But the problem is the mob gets involved, the mafia. And they obviously want to take over a lot of the construction and things within Night City. That didn't work out. Richard Knight did not want to give them any sort of power or sway within the city. So most of the things that were created through processes that Knight himself was privy to. Unfortunately, this led to Knight getting assassinated in his penthouse by presumably a mafia hitman. We don't actually know who did it. But what's important is Knight died, and after that, the city was named Night City in his honor. And then the mob took over. So it took over for a little bit. And then eventually the corporations within the city were like, you know what? We're kind of sick of these mobster guys running the place. So Arasaka, the major Japanese mega corporation that you might have heard of if you played 2077, they came in and they cleared out those mobsters pretty quickly. There was a huge war, and a lot of people died. It's just kind of Night City. But anyways, after the smoke cleared, the mob was gone, and Arasaka stood in its place. And that was kind of the position that everything was in Cyberpunk 2020, with Arasaka pretty much running the show around Night City. They were kind of the big people around there, just because they'd won out against the mob. However, that wasn't going to last for long. there are these cool little things called corporate wars in the cyberpunk universe, where corporations, typically the very large ones, go to full-scale military conflicts like they are actual nations. And this one was the fourth corporate war, and it had to do with two companies called Otech and Sino out in the ocean. Otech and Sino were hiring Arasaka and Militech as corporate security. Arasaka and Militech took this opportunity and ran with it, and pretty much it became a war between those two corporations, even after Otech and Sino had signed a peace treaty. So, yeah, things got pretty bad. The war went from like a shadow war to a hot war pretty quick. People were getting orbital striked, people, like, entire cities were getting nuked. It was really bad. But what happened to Night City during this fourth corporate war was, somebody nuked Night City. They nuked Arasaka Tower, and it's not somebody. We know who did it. It was Militech, sending in a bunch of famous people. You might have heard of them: Johnny Silverhand, Morgan Blackhand. A lot of hands, but, I mean, they were all there. Spider-Murphy Rogue, big names in the cyberpunk setting. They were all present at the Night City bombing. So after the Arasaka Tower gets nuked, goes down, Night City enters a period of economic collapse, essentially. Things are just not great. The world supply chains, they're just gone. A lot of the oceans are just unnavigationable. Just things are not good for the world as a whole. But Night City especially, it's got a giant, huge burning crater in the middle of the city. It's not doing too hot. So, basically, that leaves us now at the Time of the Red, which is when Cyberpunk Red takes place. And the Time of the Red is called that because a lot of the debris from the giant steaming crater in the middle of the city actually reflects, or the sun reflects off of it and creates a red atmosphere in the sky on some days. So you just walk out and it's just crimson red outside. And that's why they call it the Time of the Red. So yeah, that's kind of a brief history of Night City and how it's wound up where it is in Cyberpunk Red, which is much worse off than any other time in its history. However, that does also leave a lot of opportunities for very fun campaigns. For instance, supplies are hard to get in Night City. So running missions about getting supplies or finding out like new fun little trade routes or whatever can always be a fun session. But obviously it's Night City, and a lot of that stuff goes on the corporations and how they're sort of handling their kind of change in power. Because after the fourth corporate war, a lot of corporations, they didn't have as much of that anymore. So they've had to adjust as well. A lot of corporations during the Time of the Red are regional rather than international. So rather than having Trauma Team, you can have Trauma Team North America, Trauma Team Asia, Trauma Team Europe. And that does create a bit of a dichotomy between these different sort of factions, I guess. Because, Netwatch in the Pacifica Confederation is going to be way different from Pacifica and Dixie. So, Night City. What kind of things happen there? Well, a lot of bad things, generally. The corporations in Night City aren't really beholden to the law as much as your typical average everyday person would be. Obviously, they can still do very illegal things and still get caught by the media for doing those illegal things, but the fallout's not going to be as severe as it would if any normal person did that exact thing. Typically, corporations, they're going to wind up getting away with it most times just because it's Night City and they can. Like, just Night City's, imagine if Amazon owned an entire city and they could do pretty much anything they wanted in the city legally. They could even have you kidnapped and killed, and they'd probably get away with it. That's Night City. That's Night City. And on top of that, there's a terrible gang problem. I could go on for hours about the gangs in Night City. All you need to know, however, is that the gangs in Night City they're a lot different from the gangs you might find in any old city. In Night City, the gangs are insane people that are sculpted to look like clowns. That's right, those big shoes they're wearing aren't their shoes, those are their feet. It's pretty messed up. Another gang, Poser Gangers, they are an entire group of people who have gotten themselves plastic surgery to look like a person, a famous figure, a celebrity, or something. So you can have entire gangs of John F. Kennedy hunting you down, trying to kill you or beat you with a baseball bat or something. It's as serious as a setting as it can be. God can turn into a clown show real fast, a literal clown show. But at the end of the day, I mean, I don't know. It's got its own sort of draw to it, where it is that cyberpunk setting that you see in Blade Runner and all these other things, but it's just got its own little special blend of manic mayhem of just that right amount of social commentary, where somehow Pondsmith's managed to get a lot of things right, and that's scary. That's really scary. Anyways, that's enough about Night City for now. I think that we'll have to wrap up for today, but if you come in next week, we are going to be having a guest, a friend of mine, who will be able to discuss a little bit more about different stories and things that have happened in Night City, and different things that we've done. So I'm excited to get to have him in here. So yeah, come back next week, and we're going to be talking a bit more with my friend Jordan about experiences in my games, Dungeons & Dragons and Cyberpunk. So that's going to be exciting. All right, this has been Dungeons & Dystopias. My name is Tyler Hapney, and thank you for listening.